Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the College Sports Hive. Leaf and I back together for what feels like the first time in a while. Quite honestly, we haven't recorded anything as a twosome here in a while. But if for those of you that don't know, that's Leaf. I'm Scott, and we're here to talk news on this Monday for all of y'all. We'll have our picks coming out a little bit later this week due to the fact that it is conference championship week and the brackets are still coming out, so we don't necessarily have all of them and what they're going to look like. But we'll be doing a little bit different pick segment. We'll be kind of just picking the team that we think is going to win that bracket, and then giving some upset picks and some upset bids that we are anticipating on happening, and some teams that can make a run towards the conference championship that might surprise some of you. So look out for that later this week. It's gonna be a good one. But we're here to talk news on this episode, and we'll go down as usual and give our top fives as of right now, our teams of the week, our performances of the week, and the rankings, and then our little slot of news. So pretty standard news episode for all of y'all here, and I'll just toss it over to you, Leaf, and get us rolling with your top five teams and some reasonings as to why you have them in the order that you do.
Alrighty. So I've got Gonzaga number one, the lone undefeated. I've got Baylor number two, and I honestly I've been super high on Baylor, and those of you who've been with us for a while have seen me place Baylor above Gonzaga. And after this week, I almost feel that same way, but there is a loss disparity, so I'll just give the Gonzaga the title because of their being undefeated. I've got Illinois at number three, Michigan at number four. I'm not sure this is fully representing who I think is better. I think that Illinois won against Michigan, had a better week because Michigan lost twice. So I'm just rewarding the hotter team. I'm not sure they're holistically better, and I'm really hopeful we can see another matchup. I think it'll be an awesome championship game in the Big Ten tournament. But right now, I'll just go Illinois 3, Michigan 4, rewarding the most recent performances. And number 5, I've got Iowa. They really closed the year well, started playing better defense, and when you've got Luka Garza, the presumptive National Player of the Year, that really gives you a chance. So that's my top 5, and I think that's probably what the poll will be. I haven't checked though.
Yeah, it is actually exactly what the poll is, I'm pretty sure. But I have similar teams. I just have Michigan and Illinois flip-flopped at 3 and 4. I just think Michigan's still like a better overall team, but that win that Illinois had over them without Aya DeSumo was impressive. They really locked down defensively. So I probably, if hindsight was 2020, should give Illinois the number 3 spot and just be consistent with what you and the AP poll have. But for some reason, I'm just being drawn to kind of keeping Michigan in that 3 spot. And I just think they had a really bad day, and Illinois had one of their best days of the year without their best player. So I don't know. I'm still a very big believer in Michigan. They had a really rough week. They lost twice again. But with that being said, I do think they kind of had the Big Ten championship kind of wrapped up, and regular season that is, and we're just kind of cruising to the finish line before jumping into Indianapolis and playing in the Big Ten Conference Championship. So, yeah, I'm definitely up for debate and could easily flip flop Illinois and Michigan, but Gonzaga and Baylor are my 1 and 2 in that order, and then Iowa is 5 as well for me. We can talk more about this as we get down to the rankings, but before we started recording today, I kind of gave you my thoughts on this. Is just, if I look past the top 4 teams in the country, I don't really see a team that is a clear-cut national championship contender. Like, I would put money on them having a chance to win it all. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, and in what Mark and I talked about in my last episode is kind of that we were saying who could contend for the Elite Eight, because it almost feels like Baylor and Gonzaga for all year kind of have had that like 2 spots in the Final Four. And obviously there's work to be done. March produces craziness, but it just feels that way. And then you feel like Michigan and Illinois are the only 2 that could play on the same playing field as those guys. I mean, we saw West Virginia go toe to toe with some of the better teams. They lost to both Baylor and Gonzaga by 5. We saw Illinois lose to Baylor earlier this year, and Michigan hasn't played like the same people, but it just feels that way. It feels like their quality is above the rest, and I would be pretty stunned if a team outside the top 4 I bet you one will make it. They won't be fully chalk. I bet you one team won't make the Final Four out of the top 4, but I'd be pretty stunned if one of those teams was able to make a championship, much less win it. That is not in the top 4 currently.
I just stubbed my toe. That really hurt. But anyway, yeah, I agree with you for sure. But you said earlier when when we were talking our top fives, that you were back kind of on the Baylor bandwagon, and you were talking how much you were still impressed with them, and I see you have them here as your team of the week. So give some reasonings and some thoughts as to why you're not necessarily you ever really left the trend, but why you would consider putting them back above Gonzaga for the number one team in the country.
Yeah, so like you alluded to, they're my team of the week. They were 3-0 with wins over West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and Texas Tech, all ranked teams, all really good teams. And the biggest thing about that is just the resilience I saw in the West Virginia game on the Tuesday Sonic Blockbuster. You could have been like, oh man, we had a pause. We're still figuring things out, but they found a way to win that game, and I don't think they played their best, and they're still able to beat a team that was playing their best basketball in West Virginia at West Virginia. And it was, to me, that was just very impressive and indicative of a fighting spirit. And then you saw them come out and play an Oklahoma State team that at that point was probably the hottest team in the country. I mean, they moved up 5 spots this week because even losing to Baylor, Oklahoma State did. And they were able to beat them. And I know people will be like, oh, Cade Cunningham got hurt, but Cade Cunningham got hurt with 30 seconds left in the game, and Baylor was up 12. So I really appreciate how they were able to play such good basketball off the break. They're shooting well. That was the big thing against Iowa State and Kansas. They couldn't put a ball in an ocean, and their legs weren't the same. They're defending at a high level. They're scoring in the 80s and 90s, and the reason that I compare them with Gonzaga, I just think that playing the Big 12 where you play 7 ranked teams is just a lot different than playing the WCC, where the best team you're facing is BYU, who's still not ranked. And that's not a slight at BYU. I actually love the way BYU and Mark Pope play, but I just think that the competition makes them better. And the fact that they lost a game might ease pressure. Like, I'd rather have one loss and be an elite team than be undefeated in terms of just like how I feel entering games. I think that would be pressure inducing more so than helpful.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Baylor has always been that team that I've been more believing in terms of a national championship contender than Gonzaga. But when you break it down, we saw Gonzaga just run through a very, very hard non-conference schedule, but it's been a really long time since those games happened in like December. And so I think when you make the point of the schedule that Baylor has had to go through in the Big 12 is absolutely huge when it comes down to March, and when you're going to play good teams day in and day out, when you're in the NCAA tournament, you don't get a night off. There's not going to be a team that you're just like, oh, we don't even have to really show up and win this game. There's a couple of teams like that in the WCC for Gonzaga where they could start their bench players and win the game. So I think just kind of having that sort of continuous test and knowing that that's the mindset that you have to have is easier to continue rather than to start over again, if that makes sense for Baylor rather than Gonzaga. But I'm gonna throw it back to a kind of mid-major conference for my team of the week, and I'm going to go with Morehead State. They beat Belmont in the Ohio Valley Conference Final. Morehead State was the 2 seed, Belmont was the 1 seed. That gets them their automatic bid into the NCAA tournament. So congratulations to Morehead State. This is their first March Madness appearance since 2011. So it's been 10 years since we've seen them in the big dance, and I'll get to some of their individual players and my performances of the week for a person, but yeah, let's shoot it back to you and tell me your individual guy of the week.
Yeah, I felt like staying with Baylor as well, and the player I'd say is their third best guard, and this just speaks to how good they are. Is Maceo Teague, and he averaged 22 points through 3 games on the week, all wins, as I said, including a 35-point outburst where he hit 10 threes on 12 attempts on his senior day. I'm a bit of a softie for senior day. I think when you get seniors in, whether it be the walk-on or a star senior, and they give a little speech, I felt bad that a lot of them didn't get to do it with fans, so I wanted to make sure to choose a senior on this one, and just shout out to Luka Garza. I'm gonna kind of, he's got some news, so we'll have some news for you. And he had an awesome senior day as well, where he had 21 and 16 and an Iowa win, so ending his Hawkeye career in a grand fashion.
Yeah, definitely. You love to see kind of them go out on a high note and have those great performances, and we'll touch on a little bit later Luka Garza in the news around his senior day. But I'm gonna go Johnny Broom and Skylar Potter for Morehead State. They both had huge double doubles in that championship game. Broom had 27 points, 12 rebounds, and Potter had 22 points and 13 rebounds in the Ohio Valley Conference Final over Belmont. So and they beat the number 1 seed in that conference by 15 in the championship game. So pretty impressive performance for Morehead State, and excited to see them in the NCAA tournament, and maybe they can steal a win or two and be a little bit of a shocker. But anyway, let's jump down into the top 10 and discuss the rankings. And we kind of brought up my main point that I had with them about the NCAA tournament champion contenders, but let's go down through the top 10 and tell y'all what they are this week. Number 1, Gonzaga. Number 2, Baylor. Pretty clear cut there. Illinois is number 3, like you had. Michigan is number 4. Iowa is number 5. So the exact same top 5 that you kind of presented, and I definitely kind of deferred to. Alabama 6, Houston 7, Arkansas 8, Ohio State 9, and West Virginia 10. Any sort of surprises for you in this top 10?
I don't know if I'm surprised by anything, but the one thing that sticks out to me is just how much faith that the committee has in Ohio State, because they've really, really struggled to close the year. And I wouldn't really say there were any bad losses, which is perhaps what's keeping them in the top 10. But to lose, I want to say they've lost 4 in a row. To lose 4 in a row, be now 5th in their conference in terms of the heading into the conference tournament. They're the 5th seed, and to be 9th in the country is pretty ridiculous, considering that they lost, I think eight games in the Big Ten. And so that just speaks to the strength of the Big Ten, but strength of what Ohio State did early in the season and beating all those teams on the road when they got hot. So I wouldn't say I'm stunned that they're a top 10 team just because they've been there so much, but like I wouldn't have assumed if a team lost 8 games in conference and lost their final 4 that they'd be a top 10, I guess is the way I'd phrase that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that for sure. They only fell 2 spots from 7 to 9 this week after some more losses. So I was a little bit surprised by that. But I think I'm surprised kind of to see Alabama and Arkansas up at 6 and 8 out of the SEC. I don't necessarily have anything against the SEC or what's happening there. I just don't think they're as strong of a conference as the Big 12 or the Big 10. So I definitely think that you see them represented very well in this top 10. And I'm just surprised Arkansas isn't more along the 11 or something like that line. But with that being said, they do have that big win over Alabama. So I would just kind of reiterate that Alabama is iffy for me. Houston, I don't think has a chance to win it all. Arkansas, I don't think has a chance to win it all. And Ohio State and West Virginia, I don't think have chances to win it all. And those are 4 out of the top 10 teams that I can legitimately say in my eyes don't really have a chance of winning the national championship, which I think is just kind of crazy in when you're heading into March and a week away from Selection Sunday.
Yeah, I got one question for you, and I want to preface it just a bit real quickly before we transition. So basically, I came into this year thinking, wow, we're going to have a top-heavy year again. Like we can talk about 2019, our last March Madness. We had Virginia win it, and they were one of the best teams in the country. But the number 1 overall seed was Duke, a blue blood. You had North Carolina as a number 1 seed as well. Kentucky was a 2. You had Tennessee was really good with tons of top-heavy talent, and all the blue bloods. Kansas was a good team, 4 seed that year, so not up to their standards, but same idea. So this year I came in thinking that we would have a really top heavy year, and Michigan State made the Final Four that year as a 2. So we're having a lot of these same teams that we think about now. We'd be like, they have down years, but we came in thinking they've got a lot of talent. We learned that COVID kind of impacted it. And now we might have the most top heavy thing still. It's just, we don't have the depth of talent that I saw come in. And I guess the 2 questions is, 1, is that consistent with what you're seeing? And 2, out of the teams that aren't in the top 4, who do you think could crack a Final Four? I'm not saying win a championship, because I mean at that point it's just like anyone's game once you're in the Final Four. But do you think anyone could crack the Final Four out of that 4 through 10 or 5 through 10 part?
Yeah, and to answer the first part of the question is, I definitely agree with you. I think you have Gonzaga, Baylor, Illinois, and Michigan, who are all very good. I think they will be the 4-1 seeds, and they all have a legitimate chance to make the Final Four and win the NCAA tournament. I think all of them do. A healthy Illinois and a healthy Michigan, mind you. I don't think if Michigan's missing pieces or if Illinois doesn't have, I'd assume that they have a chance to beat Baylor or Gonzaga. With that being said, to answer kind of your second part is I would have to look to a team such as Alabama, Iowa, or West Virginia would really be my three inside this top 10 as of right now. That I would say have a shooter's chance to make the NCAA Final Four, and it's exactly that. It's a shooter's chance. West Virginia plays really good defense, and if they shoot well, they're hard to beat. And they've played in that proven Big 12 schedule, and they've been looking good down the stretch, which is always what you want to see. Iowa, same kind of situation for me. They play in the Big Ten. They've had a very, very hard schedule. They've lost pieces here and there, and they're going to be battling injuries down the stretch. But with that being said, I think they can shoot, and they have the offensive potential to hang with anybody if they have a semi-decent good defensive performance. That's a big if. I think and then with Alabama, it's just they haven't been tested as much, and that's kind of why I'm a little bit more hesitant to say that they're in that kind of conversation. It's just because they don't play the kind of the depth and the strength of teams that are in the Big Ten and the Big 12 night in and night out. We've seen them kind of go on the road to Arkansas in a big game scenario and not really look their best. So I have worries about pretty much every single one of them outside of the top two, because I still have worries about Michigan and Illinois.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think if we're discussing it briefly here, if you want to listen to this kind of conversation again, I talked with Mark Cundiff about it, and I think we're basically reiterating what we said there, is that there's a clear-cut top couple, and the rest could make our contenders for the Elite Eight, but I'm not sure they're contenders for the Final Four or a championship. Championship to me, it's really Gonzaga or Baylor still, and it sounds silly to say Gonzaga, Baylor, the field with how good Illinois and Michigan have been. I still think there's a gap. Yeah,
definitely. And as Leaf was mentioning, this is in his Tulane takeover Tulane whatever day takeover number 2, and that was with Mark Cundiff. So great episode if you want to go check that one out. How about you take us down through some of the biggest movers, and then I'll give some thoughts on that, and then you can take us through the news docket that you have for us this week.
For sure. So yeah, moving up and trending in the right direction was Virginia. They'd lost 3 in a row in ACC play. Looked on the outside looking in, and they moved up from 21 to 16. But more importantly, they won the ACC outright after Florida State dropped to at Notre Dame. So that was a big news for Tony Bennett and company. Oklahoma State, we alluded to this earlier. They moved up 5 spots from 17 to 12. This is a real contender in my eyes to make an Elite Eight. I'm not saying a Final Four, but this is just as good as the teams that are 5 through 10 in my eyes. Arkansas, we talked about them. They're moved up from 12 to 8 after another good week. And Purdue, Matt Painter and company, moved up 3 spots from 23 to 20, securing the 4th seed in the Big Ten tournament, which just sounds kind of silly, but that is a huge deal considering they passed Ohio State, who is top 10 in the country. On the downsides, the team that's kind of struggling right now is Oklahoma. They've dropped 9 spots from 16 to 25th. This is their second straight week of dropping 9 spots. They fell from 7th to 16th not too long ago. West Virginia dropped 4 spots from 6th to 10th. They fell to Baylor and Oklahoma State. Villanova dropped 4 spots from 10 to 14th. That was a very tough situation we'll get to in just a moment here. And Florida State, as I talked about, fell to Notre Dame, and they did not end the season as well as Leonard Hamilton would have liked, and they dropped 4 spots from 11th to 15th. Did any of these stand out to you?
Oklahoma clearly is struggling, right? I mean, they have 2 consecutive weeks of dropping 9 spots is absolutely the last trend that you want to have happening to your program as the calendar turns to March. So that one stands out. Obviously, I love Austin Reeves. I've been very high on that team for a couple of weeks. They had that really impressive run where they rattled off 3 straight top 15 at least wins over teams in the Big 12. Virginia stands out to me as well, because that's a team that you would consider to have every sort of puncher's chance getting into when you look at the tournament and you say they can play defense against people, and if they get the offensive capabilities that we are expecting from a Virginia team, watch out for them. I mean, they've been there, done that however many times. So that's one that stands out to me and is sneaky all the way down there at 16. But like you said, Oklahoma State, man, they're on a roll, and we have some news about Cade Cunningham and a little bit of a sprained ankle being day to day. But if he gets healthy and come the tournament, and they can go on and beat a lot of people. So I would say those are kind of the ones that stand out the most to me. And we'll get to Villanova here in a minute, but that's a tough situation, like you mentioned. So I think unless you have any further thoughts of those moves, I think we can go down into some of the news.
Yeah, let's hit the news, and I think the biggest news is probably out of Villanova, in my opinion, at least. So I'll start us off right there, and I think that Villanova, we already kind of said they were pretenders. We were kind of consistent with that notion, but now I think it is really kind of they all their chances are taken away. That their heartbeat of their team is Colin Gillespie. He tore his MCL. And that was in the game against Creighton. They actually rallied to win that game and win the Big East. And so I guess he didn't go out for nothing, but I think that Colin Gillespie isn't the type of guy who's going to really celebrate a Big East title when he thinks he could have led his team to a championship. He's out for the season. And worse for them than just Colin Gillespie, the point guard that they appointed was their shooting guard, Justin Moore. Justin Moore suffered what Jay Wright called a pretty severe ankle injury in the following game. So that's brutal news for a team that in such a rich program that play the right way in Villanova. And you wish the best. And I'm really hoping Colin Gillespie is also a senior. So I'm hopeful that he returns and takes advantage of having an extra free year. Because I don't know, I just have a sour taste in my mouth for a guy who's really the consummate do-it-all player, team guy, going out in a way like that. So I'm hopeful he comes back, and obviously it's a bit selfish of me wanting to see him, but I think all of college basketball does.
Yeah, right. It's just really hard news. And this is another team, like we mentioned and have been mentioning all year, in Villanova, where you expect them to be around come March, and they're still ranked. They're number 14 as of right now. But these are two pieces that are really going to hurt them come March. There's just no way around it. You can't lose your best player and still say we have a legitimate chance to go to the Elite Eight. Like that's just not the way it works. They still have Jeremiah Robinson Earl, but I don't know. You don't necessarily have that same kind of belief as of right now. And absolutely what you said, I agree with. Like, you hope he comes back. It's just really hard to hear. You never want to hear things like this happen, especially for a program that we've kind of said multiple times so far this season that they're going to need everything that they can to really push to what you would kind of expect come this time to Villanova live up to. And so it's hard. You never want to count anyone out. Things like this can really raise everyone else's level to another condition that you normally wouldn't expect them to play at. That's one of those things that is a rallying cry for that entire team is to play for these guys. But it's hard. So we'll see what happens with Villanova in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And right now their point guard slotted in is Chris Archidiakono, the younger brother of Ryan Archidiakono, who led them to the title in 2016. So that'll be interesting to monitor. And you hope they're able to rally for him. Like Auburn's cry was kind of do it for Chuma when Chuma Okeke went down and they were able to make the Final Four. But it's a little different when it's Colin Gillespie than it is a forward as good as Chuma Okeke was. Staying on the injury train, you mentioned Cade Cunningham rolled his ankle at the end of the West Virginia game. He was able to walk off under his own power. He hurt himself in the Baylor game. He missed the West Virginia game. Oklahoma State was still able to win that game. And all signs point to he'll be able to play in the Big 12 tournament. And if he doesn't, I think he would be able to go for March Madness. One that really concerns me in terms of injuries was Joe Wieskamp had a severe ankle sprain for Iowa. It was against Wisconsin. He started off that game 5 of 5 for 12 points. Playing great. He's been a large part of their kind of, I don't want to say resurgence because they've always been a pretty highly ranked team, but how they've really elevated their game recently, and it didn't look good. He was unable to put any weight on his ankle. So I really hope he can come back and really help them, if not for the Big Ten tournament, because I don't think he'll be there. But I'd like to see him be back for March Madness because he gives Iowa a real chance to be an Elite Eight team. And similarly, Eli Brooks had a pretty bad sprained ankle, landing on the heel of Marcus Bingham in the game yesterday for Michigan versus Michigan State, and so he's a key component of kind of their heady leader, the veteran of that whole team, him and Isaiah Livers. So that's a Final Four contender, a championship contender that could be missing their guard for a period of time. Hopefully, it's just the Big Ten tournament, if that, but it never is a good thing to see injuries around this time of the year, and they're so important. All these players are vital to really good teams. And you never want to have injuries at all, but these teams certainly, I bet you, if you were to rank who they want injured, aside from like Luka Garza, Joe Wieskamp's the last one they want, and Cade Cunningham, obviously the last one that Oklahoma State wants, and Eli Brooks is an integral part of Michigan, and all really good teams that I think all three of them are very much so Elite Eight, Final Four contenders. So tough news on the injury front, and just transitioning out of the injury front that we mentioned, Luka Garza had some news. Number 5, Iowa was victorious, beating Wisconsin 77-73. And after the game, it was senior night. They at Carver Hawkeye Arena, they announced that they will retire Garza's number 55. No one will be wearing the double nickel ever again for the Hawkeyes. And he gave a very nice, touching speech, and it was well deserved. So we wanted to give some recognition for him there. Luka Garza, what a guy! That guy's awesome. On a more serious note, Creighton players said that their coach Greg McDermott's words hurt them. He made an analogy that was very offensive, and I don't think he meant it in a horrible way, but he owned up to and said that like he should never have said what he said. And he's right now suspended as the coach, so they're playing with an interim coach heading into March Madness in the Big East tournament. And they might be the favorites for the Big East tournament as it is, with Villanova having the injuries that they do. So that's interesting, and certainly one that I think we will be monitoring beyond this season, because that was a very much reprehensible comment for a post game situation. And I think one thing that we've got a lot of teams punch their tickets, but one that may have punched their ticket unofficially was Michigan State. They beat Michigan, they beat Illinois in the past couple of weeks, and they beat Ohio State. That is enough for their resume, in my opinion. I think they punched their ticket. And then officially, the teams that punched their ticket were Loyola Chicago. They probably would have made it anyway, and they may have stolen a bid from Drake. If Drake had won, Loyola Chicago would have made it anyway. Winthrop clinched the Big South. Houston made an awesome buzzer beater to beat Memphis, and now we'll be playing for the championship in the American. And we had Scott's Moorhead State team also punch their ticket, getting some auto bids, as well as Liberty. So that's kind of the news here. Anything from that really stand out to you? And I know that was a lot to digest and from a few different situations, but a lot of important news heading into March, both on the personal fronts and who's dancing.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll touch on some individual aspects of it, and it's like a lot of ankle problems. And me and you have both been through ankle injuries. We've both sprained ankles. We know how the severity of those work. Like you can have an ankle sprain where you can walk afterwards, which I think is kind of what you saw with Cade Cunningham. And you can have an ankle sprain where you can't even put an ounce of weight on that thing, and it swells up the size of a baseball on your foot, and you're not even thinking about running for a couple months. And so hopefully for all of these players' sake, you never want to see the baseball-sized ankle sprain. It sucks. And so hopefully Wieskamp doesn't have that baseball ankle sprain, because he's an integral part of Iowa, and Iowa's already lost people. They lost Jack Nunge. Conor Mccaffrey has been banged up. And so this is another third integral piece to that team that's battling an injury. And that's kind of why I left them out a little bit in terms of those 4 teams that can really push Final Four NCAA tournament, is this Joe Wieskamp injury. And so also hearing that Cade Cunningham is day-to-day makes me assume that his ankle sprain is not as bad as Wieskamp's or even Eli Brooks. Like Eli Brooks isn't, like you said, an integral part of Michigan. So tough news all throughout the the injury spectrum here, and some teams that are really having great seasons, and hopefully not necessarily limiting them come their conference tournaments or the big dance. To touch on Luka Garza, just an amazing story. He's had a tremendous career, so to see him kind of honored that way is fitting, and it's the right thing to do, and I love to see that. Michigan State, phenomenal. And they still have the Big Ten tournament to get to, because they can still add some more impressive wins to that resume if they can repeat some of them and go and make a run there. So I would say that they've already done that, but they even have further room to grow and things to show the committee before Sunday. So you love to see that, and hopefully they can continue to play well. And we love to see some of the Loyola Chicago's, the Drakes. Those games are amazing. Winthrop clinching the Big South, and Houston continuing to make a push to win the American, where they've been, in my opinion, the best team all year. So I'll kind of leave the McDermott words as of right now. I mean, I think you summed it up pretty well. Is it's going to be an ongoing thing. We're going to have to hear more news about that as it goes, and you never want to hear something like that. It's really difficult to kind of comprehend when something like that happens, and you hear the person say it wasn't meant to be hurtful in any way. It kind of just shows a little bit more tone deafness than anything else in that aspect of things. And we're living in a society where things get highlighted heavily, and it's the way it is. And so I would expect some harsh repercussions are coming in that aspect of things. So, but with that being said, more news on that will come out eventually. So we'll have that for you when it does. And I think you did a great job taking us through the majority of it. And those are kind of my thoughts and opinions on it all.
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing about the Luka Garza situation is I listened to his interview afterward, and people knock him for being like coming back, and they're like, oh, he's just not an NBA talent. He's just dominating college because he's big. But this is a guy that wasn't highly recruited. This is a guy that like worked himself into shape and got more athletic. Like, you're given what you're given. And he made the most of that to the point where he's going to win National Player of the Year. I'm almost certain of it. And he's excellent. He's got his team in the top 5. And the first thing he said is he didn't say anything about himself the entire speech. He said, I just want to thank he said Conor Mccaffrey and the family. So that means his Fran's wife and the two sons that play on the team with him. Then he thanked his teammates and gave a huge hug to Jordan Bohannon, a fellow senior who'd been there just as long as he had. And then he kind of pointed at the rest of the team. And then he said, you know what, I wanted to thank you guys. And there's just friends and family up in the stands because there's no one there. And then he said, like, it's like, he basically said it's surreal. And I know that it's like, there's some cliches to that, but he was overcome with emotion. There's a video of him being told by Fran McCaffrey what's going to happen. And I'm not certain, but I'm pretty sure what I lip read is he's like, I can't believe it. Thank you so much. And it was just genuine. Like, you don't see like guys that are going to be so happy and not know they're going to be in the rafters. Like, it's giving the flowers to the person while he's there. Not 20 years later, they're like, oh, no one can wear 55 now when Luka Garza is 42. But when he's 22 and he's right there leading the team, and I love the notion. I loved watching that situation. And I'm really happy, and I hope more colleges do that. And I know you don't want to be too giving of these awards, but I can't think of anyone in all of college basketball right now more deserving of it than him. And one player like that we mentioned is Colin Gillespie has a case, but like Luka Garza even more so. And I hope more colleges kind of take a page out of Iowa's book in this case. And I was really happy to see that.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. All right, so to kind of wrap up here, we'll give a little teaser of we have a couple teams, the ACC first team and the Big East first team. All conference teams have been announced. So look for an episode from us coming out about once everything kind of dies down. We got a lot to get to here with conference tournaments and the NCAA tournament. Once everything kind of dies down, we'll have those sort of postseason awards and accolades and things like that to give out. So big shout out to those that have made the ACC first team. We'll just give a little preview here. The ACC first team is Moses Wright for Georgia Tech, Justin Champagny from Pitt, Carlick Jones from Louisville, Matthew Hurt from Duke, and Sam Hauser from Virginia. We'll kind of give the rest of them once things dies down here, but your thoughts on the ACC first team and what to expect from other conferences following suit.
I really liked this first team, and as it was going along, what the sleeper was Moses Wright. He was injured a little bit at the beginning of the year, and what made Georgia Tech like off to a slow start, and then you saw his value. And a lot of times you see players injured for like they're missing a few games, and they're like, oh, you missed 4 games at the beginning of the year, and what you did the last 14 doesn't matter. And I think it was the fact that Moses Wright was the most impactful player on a winning team in the ACC. There's a couple of trains of thought, like you could argue that Sam Hauser has a really good chance because he was the best player on the best team. I'm happy with this first team. I think they did a good job divvying it up. It's a lot of forwards. There's a lot of big dudes on there. I wish there was like I like the traditional positions, but I think they got the 5 best players. And then they also gave Defensive Player of the Year to Jose Alvarado, the point guard for Georgia Tech. And I love that move just because you don't see that. You usually see a shot blocking big, and I was really happy to see that. So props to them, and also the Coach of the Year in the ACC was Mike Young of Virginia Tech, kind of leading a resurgent year for them. So we'll have all these. We'll kind of compare it to what we predicted entering the year, and we got a few on this one, not all of them, but yeah, a lot of fun stuff to come. And obviously we got Champ Week this week, and then we got March Madness Selection Sunday. So we're really excited. I hope you guys are, and we're going to keep pumping out content for you guys.
Yep, going to be another busy week. We've got picks coming out Wednesday. Leafs takeover will be Thursday, and then I'll be back with you all on Sunday for my thing. So make sure to stay tuned for the rest of the week. It's going to be a great week, and we can't wait to see some of these conference championships unfold, as well as Selection Sunday right down the road. So any final thoughts before we sign off?
I just can't wait. This is if you give me 10-day spot, I want from like Thursday of this week, take the 3 days in between Selection Sunday and when the tournament starts, and take those 10 days and minus those 3. If you give me a week out of that, that's my favorite week of the year. So I can't wait. You won't be seeing me without a smile on my face while talking sports right now. So I can't wait.
Gotta love it. All right, everyone, take care, stay safe, and we'll catch you later this week. My Lord, take care.
Have a good one.